I think it's going. Do you want to introduce us again?
Yeah, welcome to the Dustin and Mitch podcast.
Mitch and Dustin.
Whatever. It's been a while. We took a hiatus. Took a little hiatus from this, but we're back.
Yeah. It's been like over a year.
Yep. Because the truth is we only have this podcast so that me and Dustin can just talk to each other. So he moved to Utah, and so we didn't have to do podcast chats. But now he's back in Reno, so we got to have podcast chats again.
Yep. It's our only way of communicating. So.
Yep.
Interestingly enough, our last topic was a review of The Killer's then new album, Imploding the Mirage. And what is our topic today, Mitch?
Today we're going to do an album review of The Killer's new album, Pressure Machine.
That's right.
So picking up right where we left off, which
the sequel to our last
sequel. Yeah, speaks to The Killer's ability to churn out music, I guess. If during a hiatus they created a whole album, so
yeah,
pretty cool.
I think it's just kind of funny. We only have stuff to say when new music is released. So
that's right. I don't know what you had in mind, Dustin, but last time we just went track by track through the album. I think that works pretty good. But before we do, what are your first impressions of the album?
My first impressions.
Yes.
Not my second or third or fourth or fifth impressions.
When you first
because they are very different. My first impressions of the album. Okay, I'll just being straight honest. I did not recognize anything that I liked about the Killers. Like when I think of the reasons why I like the Killers, I didn't hear any of that in my first listen. None of the Killers tropes or isms or quirks. I didn't recognize any of it. I thought this is the worst Killers album. It doesn't sound like the Killers. I hate it. By the second or third listen, I started to recognize some of those things. I started to notice, oh, that thing is a mannerism that the Killers exemplify. Okay, this is more like the Killers. I started to recognize more. And by like the fifth time listening to it, I was just like, I remember when she set the room on fire with her eyes. I was just jamming out to it, you know? So, but that's how it goes, I guess.
Yeah. I had an interesting experience. So I talked to you over dinner about my anticipation of this album being released after it had been announced, and had said that, okay, so they were planning on going on tour for Imploding the Mirage. That got shut down with COVID. So they just sat down and said, well, I guess we'll release another album. And my thoughts going into it were, it was either going to be that these were leftover songs that had already been written that weren't good enough to be on another album, so they just threw them together and called it an album, and it was going to be crappy. Or they just hurried up and rushed and wrote new songs in a short period of time, and it was going to be crappy. I was partly right and partly wrong about that in different ways. But my first impression was similar to yours, where I listened to it and I said, man, initially these lyrics sound very, very surface level and explicit and kind of cheesy. And similar to you, the music was unfamiliar. This isn't the Killers. What are they doing? Katie, my wife, last year we listened, when Imploding the Mirage came out, to get her excited about the album release, we listened to the Killers discography from beginning to end. We listened to all the Killers albums and finished with Imploding the Mirage. She loved the Imploding the Mirage album, but she really enjoyed that experience. So when this album came out, I said, hey, you need to go listen to this as part of the experience. And her comments after listening one time through was, it sounds like they took all of the forgettable songs from different albums and made an album out of them. Which was, I mean, that's a fair first impression. If you're expecting Killers bangers, that's kind of what it sounds like.
Yeah. Tell me say what you texted me that one time.
So a lot of the professional music critics criticism of Imploding the Mirage was that every song was trying to be a banger. There wasn't enough time to like relax and recover from the banger songs and like build up and come back down. And it sounds like the Killers took that criticism and just made an album that had 0 bangers on it. Which is, I mean, yeah.
Which
that's what it sounds like.
I completely agreed with you when you texted me that, but then like the more I listened, the more I realized In the Car Outside is kind of a banger.
Yeah, for sure.
Probably. Like I imagine them playing it live and it being like really big and like just like a arena rock anthem kind of thing.
Yeah, so that was my first impression. Similar to you, as I listened to it again and again and again, I feel like I started to get an impression of what they were trying to do and respected that for itself, and found some of the good things and the beautiful things about all the songs and the album as a whole, and came to really appreciate it. I think that that they did what they were trying to do, and whether or not you like what the album ended up sounding like, I think if you appreciate musicianship and creativity, you have to appreciate that the album was a cool and unique piece of art.
Yeah, I think for sure. What was I going to say? What did you just say?
I said, I think they did what they were trying to do.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah.
I don't dislike the sound, and I never disliked the sound of it. Right. I initially thought, same as you, like these lyrics are just kind of cheesy, and like I don't like it when lyrics are just explicitly saying what they are about. I like a little bit of poetry, right, in songs, and symbolism and stuff like that. And I still, to an extent, think that about the album, but the sound, like I'm fine with the sound, like it's totally cool. Yeah. One thing I will say, Brandon Flowers' vocals are top notch on this album. And I thought that like from the very beginning, like even if I didn't like the songs, like I still recognize like probably more so than any other Killers album, I think they are like better than his past performances. And
I think so too. And they had to be, right? Because of the style of music that they chose to make on this album, he couldn't rely on the power or the style of music, right?
Right.
Well, I want to pick up on one thing that you just mentioned before we get into the individual tracks. Is you mentioned the explicitness. You don't normally like lyrics that are really explicit. It just says exactly what it is. It doesn't leave it open to symbolism and interpretation. And I thought the exact same thing. But if I can give maybe a little bit of a spoiler here, this album tells a story of what it's like in Brandon Flowers' hometown of Nephi, Utah. The good things and the bad things about it. And we'll get more into that as we talk about the tracks. But I think that the explicitness of the lyrics was completely necessary to tell the story in the way that he did, to create the narrative and the feeling and the understanding of what it's like in the town. He had to throw in some of those really cheesy bits and pieces about the wildflowers on the West Hills and the Salt Creek up the canyon and some of those kinds of things. Okay. Bring you to Nephi, Utah.
There are, so those things that you just mentioned, like descriptions, like those are fine. Descriptions are fine. But like, carrying sheet metal and household appliances.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like,
yeah, let's jump in here to the tracks.
Sure.
Talk to me about West Hills.
I really like it. I thought it was a good opening track to really set the mood for the album. I think the Killers are good with that. They always are good at that. I think it has a good like message or theme, I guess, right? Like our actions aren't really like, they're important, but they're not indicative of who we are as people all necessarily.
Yeah, do you think that assertion, so the lyric that he says at some point, after talking about opioid addiction, etc., he says, if there really is a judgment, he'll reject my actions and he will know my heart. He'll prepare a place for me where happiness instills, after describing all of these bad things going on in the town. Do you think that that's Brandon's assertion of what he thinks is true about God and life and the way you live your life, or is that his interpretation of the attitudes in the town he's trying to describe?
Interesting. I'm not sure. I would guess it's Brandon Flowers' own opinion. It seems to be like I think if we consider like the whole theme of the album as a whole, which maybe we'll talk about at the end, I think that's what he's trying to convey. Right? Like,
yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think that's where, after I listened to the album a few times through, like, I just started to appreciate this for, like, this album means something. And not that the other ones didn't mean something as well. But this album just described it so well in its style and its lyric, that meaning came through really strong for me. I think that this track was a jarring first track because the style of this album is so different, and this song especially is very dark and a little bit weird. I honestly don't like it that much, but I think that it sets the tone for the album really well. I do just want to say, speaking of explicit lyrics, I do think that the chorus, "They got me for possession enough to kill the horses that run free in the West Hills," is the worst lyric that Brandon Flowers has written since Some Kind of Love, when he said, "You've got the soul of a truck on a long distance haul."
Really? Okay, I didn't think it was that bad, but I agree. There it could have been more poetic. It could have been, I don't know. I sound so pretentious when I say that. But yeah.
Cool. But all in all, I think it sets the tone, and I think it introduces the theme. So that's great.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, next one is Quiet Town. What do you think of that?
Quiet Town is Just Another Girl.
Yeah.
It's the same song. It sounds a little bit different, but it's the same song. Like in the music and the melody and everything.
I didn't pick up on that, but
yeah, it's the same
I
song.
like it. I think it's really nice.
Like I said, sheet metal and household appliances.
Yeah.
So I believe last podcast, I mentioned that with the Killers, you get the best of the best lyrics and the worst of the worst lyrics. And I think you do definitely see this in this album as well. And that's just kind of one example. But there are other lyrics in this song that I really like, right? Yeah, just like...
Yep. So this song, again, pursues the theme that bad things don't make you bad people. Some lyrics from this song are talking about people committing suicide, jumping in front of the train, talking about the opioid crisis again. But throughout the song, they sing, "Good people lean on Jesus and are quick to forgive. Hardworking people, if you're in trouble, they'll lend you a hand." So it's interesting. The first song was kind of dark and describing bad things, but highlights the good. This song is generally highlighting the good, but throws in some of the bad things that are happening as well.
Yeah.
So those songs together are saying good things and bad things, they go together.
Yeah, I think that's a good interpretation. Because one of the things that I didn't like the first couple listens was like, this song sounds happy. It sounds like a happy song, but it's there are happy elements in it, like you just said, but there's other like tragic elements to this song as well. And so one of the things I thought, the music didn't really match the content of the song, but with that juxtaposition of the West Hills to this, I think you're right. It works. And especially with the whole album. That's another thing, like they didn't release a lead single, right? They didn't try to make a banger, like you said. Like they were trying for this project to tell a story, to convey a certain emotion. And I think it works with, right? If I'm looking at it as just one song, it's not as good as when I look at it in context of the whole album.
Yeah, good insight for sure. And that's where it's interesting that when you give this one listen, you don't quite get everything there is to get from this album. It takes time to get into what is this album about? What does it mean? And then you start to appreciate the little things, I think. All right, Terrible Thing is the third. What do you think?
It's kind of boring.
Yes.
It's fine. I don't dislike this one, but it's
In my notes, I say it's a beautiful song, if not just boring.
Yeah.
If I wasn't a Killers fan, I would have just hated it. I mean, it's just
sure. Yeah.
It's just a snooze fest.
Yeah.
I think it is beautiful in lyric. I think there is a lot of good symbolism and creativity in this one. I like the lyric. So this song, if I'm not mistaken, is about a homosexual teenager's struggle with the culture of the town and whether or not he's accepted. And in fact, he's contemplating suicide. And this is kind of the expression of that. And the lyric, at some point, he says, "Around here, we all take up our cross and hang on his holy name." So people are trying to do their best to look to Jesus and be religious, which is generally a good thing. But the cards that I was dealt get you thrown out of the game. I don't fit in that culture. Hey, mama, can't you see your boy is wrapped up in the strangle silk of this cobweb town? And I just think that that's a beautiful and creative lyric that I really appreciated. Even though this song is boring, I think that it's
I totally agree.
Nice.
Yeah, totally. And I think like I feel like about this song, like the melody is like very pretty, but at the same time boring. Right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I would definitely have to be in the mood to listen to this song.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this goes back to, did they do what they were trying to do with this album? Because the more I listen to music and I realize that every song just has the same chords as these other songs, a lot of what comes through in music is the production style and what they were hoping to produce. We have so many talented producers in the world who can make a song sound how they want it to, and talented musicians. The Killers have other slow, soft songs that are a little bit more exciting on other albums, right? Battleborn has a few that are beautiful. Brandon Flowers singles, solo albums have a lot of slow but beautiful songs that have some more interest and excitement. So clearly with Terrible Thing, it's pretty much entirely acoustic and vocal. And that had to have been a decision they made, right? It's not just that like, oh, this album flopped and it didn't sound how it should have. That's what they meant, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
Cool. That's about all I have to say about Terrible Thing.
Me too.
Fourth track is Cody.
I really like Cody.
Yeah, I think this might be one of my favorites on the album, probably top 2 or 3.
Yeah. It's I don't know if it's like the name of the song is just the name of a person, but I did sort of relate it to Uncle Johnny from Sam's Town. You'll get sort of, you don't really get that riff at the beginning of the song. But like towards the end of the song, you have that guitar riff that's going. And so it's like sort of reminiscent of that. I liked it.
Yeah, I think that this song, when I was listening for the first time, was a breath of fresh air. To say, this isn't the Killers, this isn't the Killers. This is the first time I hear a song that has some legs. It's a little bit stronger. It could have been a classic Killer song if they wanted to put a little more energy into it. But this is the first time you say, oh yeah, okay, this feels a little bit like the Killers.
Sure.
And you hear some of the same themes coming through. Cody thinks religion is a trick, but the chorus says, we're waiting for the miracle to come. So yet there's like people who are doubting the religion, but they can't seem to figure out a better way to do things, and it's good, but it's bad, and it's all mixed up and kind of confusing.
Yeah.
Also, it sounds a little helpless in this song. This is where I start feeling some of the downerness of the album starts to set in, when it gives you a sense of helplessness with who's going to come carry us away, right? Like, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just here.
Yeah, I think one of the things like early on in my earlier listens to the album, I was afraid I was misinterpreting things, and I still like think I may be misinterpreting things, but one of the things I got out of this song is like the emphasis on like mental health. It sounds like Cody's kind of crazy a little bit, right? Like he's struggling like to like cope with like these emotions that he has. And these thoughts and ideas that he has, and he doesn't really know how to express them. And so this like mental health es- especially in like small town Mormon culture, traditionally has been a little taboo, right? So just sort of reflecting like the lack of help, I guess, that he was receiving, even though he needed it.
And this is one of the things I love about this album, and all these things I'm saying are just my interpretation. I don't know if this is what Brandon Flowers meant,
right.
But is that he presents this as a matter of fact, really frankly, these ideas of you know what, there's deep Mormon culture in this town, and that hurts a lot of people in a lot of bad ways. But at the same time, he says these are hardworking, good people, and they help each other, and they're trying to do what's right, even though bad things happen. And it doesn't feel to me like he's trying to present this as a criticism or to be preachy. He's just telling a story. This is what it's like in this town. And that's what's beautiful to me, is this album wasn't meant to be like a political statement or some kind of thing like that. It's just saying these are real issues.
Yeah.
And I think it's great.
Yeah, I think I'll say more on that like towards the end when we sort of wrap things up. But I think that's right. I think that's definitely what he was trying to do. Just paint a picture of how things are and not say anything about it. So
yeah, great. Sleepwalker. Oh no, one more thing about Cody. The guitar solo builds up perfectly, and it's just a shame that Dave plays the guitar like a 12-year-old, because it could have just shredded. I think it builds up, and I got excited for it, and then it's good. It's a good guitar solo. It could have shredded.
No, absolutely, 100% in agreement.
All right, Sleepwalker is the next track.
I really like this one too.
Yeah, all I have to say is that it's nice. I like it.
Really? I really like it. And it's just asking to be parodied about Star Wars, right?
Skywalker.
Yeah. So yeah. No, but like I don't know how to explain it. It's like chill, but like upbeat.
Yeah. I'm going to embarrass myself here with my lack of musical knowledge. There's a song that I hear on the alt rock station all the time that sounds like this, and I thought it was an Oasis song, but I went and looked at all of Oasis's songs, and maybe it's not Oasis, but it sounds just like this, and it gives me like really chill, like late 90s alt rock vibes, and I like it.
Okay. Cool. I was thinking more like, I don't know, like a video game menu. Just the songs that's playing like as you're booting up a game, and you're just like, I don't know. Maybe that's an inaccurate description, but it's just sort of chill but upbeat, and I like it.
Great.
Groovy, I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's good. Next is Runaway Horses. Probably my least song the Killers have ever published. One of my least favorite things in music in general is a male-female duet.
Yeah, you mentioned
and the song has that, so don't like that.
Yeah,
it's a nice song.
But this one, I like a duet where they sing together more than when they take turns.
Yeah, for sure.
So I thought, what's her name, Phoebe Bridgers? I thought her voice complimented Brandon's on this track, like for the style. I thought it was really well. I thought it was a pretty song.
Yep.
But sort of, just kind of boring.
Yes.
Still kind of like a terrible thing, right?
Yeah, an impressively written song again, though. That Brandon doesn't hide behind big production. His vocals on this track are great. The song itself is beautiful, but it's kind of boring. But not the kind of music I look to the Killers to provide me with.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, in the car outside, you already mentioned.
Yeah.
Here you get some classic Killers sound. You get the pounding bass drum that comes with some Killer songs. I think it's nicely juxtaposed with Runaway Horses. By Runaway Horses, you're like, all right, I'm kind of tired, and then you get the song that's closest to a banger on the album within the car outside. So I really liked that about where they placed it on the album, and it's catchy, man.
Yep, it is totally catchy. Like I said, I imagine them playing it live, and I get psyched.
Yeah.
Like, I think this song will be in their lineup, like even when they're not touring for the album, like they'll they'll find a place in their concerts to play this song.
Yep, it's good. And I don't want to beat the dead horse, but it continues some of those same themes. It's got the lines in there about suicide or the suicidal thoughts and those kinds of things, so that even though it's a banger and it's a little more upbeat, you keep feeling a little bit uneasy or down, right? That's what I like about this album is you feel all of the feelings when you're listening to it.
Right.
You feel happy and you feel sad and you feel empathy and you feel a lot of things going on.
Yeah, and I would say my main criticism with the song is the same criticism as with Quiet Town, is that it sounds happy, but it's about, like, you know, this guy on the verge of, you know, just planting the seed for committing adultery that we'll listen to later on, right? And so, like, I don't like that.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it's like a catchy song and it's fun to listen to.
Yep. And it presents another protagonist in this album of a story, or a story of an album, right? That you've got the opioid guys, you've got the gay kid, and now you've got a guy who's an adulterer, and it's just showing all these little glimpses into different pieces of the town. Yep. And it's telling the story really well.
Yeah. Similar to your comment on Cody, the end guitar solo is very disappointing to me.
Yeah.
It's just like one riff, which is fine as a riff, but it uses that riff as the main crutch for the outro of the song. And it's repetitive. It's the same, like,
right. It's like 2 minutes. It's like a 2 minute long outro. Like they had time to play with it and do something else.
They needed to bring back Lindsey Buckingham or something, because, like, just Dave just doesn't get it done like I want him to, you know?
Yep.
But it was good. It was, makes me psyched.
Me too.
Still, so.
In Another Life.
This one, I got Wonderful, Wonderful vibes. Not the first listen to, obviously, but, like, the more I listen to it, it sounds like just a couple songs from Wonderful, Wonderful. Like it could have been on that album.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I mean, again, it just follows the same themes, right? Like, are we stuck in this hometown, in this town?
Yep. Similar to Cody.
Yeah.
That is just, you're just helpless, right? Well, I'm stuck in this town and I'm getting older and I'm just working at the factory because this is the life I was given, not because of the choices I made, but because obviously if I had another life, I would be doing something else. But since this is my life, I guess this is just my life.
Yes. So there in the song, he says, "Am I the guy you?
Am I the man of your desire,
or just the guy from your hometown?"
Mm-hmm.
As if being just a guy from your hometown would be a bad thing. I wish I had been prepared. I had planned to read this quote from my favorite philosopher, but I can't exactly find it right now.
Oh, I didn't know you were into philosophy.
Yeah. Keep talking about this song if you have anything more to say, and then I'm going to try to find it.
Yeah, the one thing I have to say is I grew up in a relatively small town, not as small as Nephi, Utah, but I grew up in a small town where pretty much everybody knows pretty much everybody else, and there's a strong Mormon culture there, etc. And this song resonated, man. When I think about the people I knew in high school who are still in my hometown, like he describes them, right? When he says, "Is this the life you chose yourself or just how it ended up? And am I the man of your desire or just some guy from your hometown?" Like the people who stayed there after high school, they all just married each other. They all just got a job at the plant. They bought a house. They had some kids, and like they're just there because that's where they were. And it seems like he described it perfectly. And so I felt that in this song.
Sure. And yeah, like you, I went to high school in a smaller town, not as small as Nephi, Utah, but I guess I have the different perspective because I moved around a lot. So I've lived in a bunch of places, but yeah, I get what he's saying, but my main criticism, and again, I'll probably say more later on, is that he paints it sort of like in a bad picture. Like the juxtaposition of the man of your desire with just some guy through your hometown, it implies like they're different things, that they can't be the same thing.
Yeah, like if you had your choice, you wouldn't have picked a guy from your hometown.
Right. So, and I think it's based on a wrong assumption about what romance is. So Christine Korsgaard, in her book, Self-Constitution, Agency, Identity, and Integrity, has this nice little quote. Contrary to romantic notions, you don't marry a person who is made for you. You marry a person who is about your age, lives in your vicinity, and is feeling ready to marry at around the same time that you are. So, like, that's just how it is. Like,
so of course it's just some guy from your hometown. Married,
what was that?
So of course it's just some guy from your hometown.
Yeah, of course it's a guy from your hometown, because those are the only people that you get married to. Yeah. Anyone who's ever get married someone around their same age, around their vicinity, right? So, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, but I like this song. It's catchy and it tells the story well. It's somewhat forgettable, I think, but an important song in the lineup.
Yep, agreed.
All right, Desperate Things.
This is the one song on the album that even after like probably like 10 listens through now, I don't like.
I think it is just as boring as the boringest tracks on this song or on this album, but not as beautiful.
Yes.
So it has the boringness going for it, but it also is not that good.
I think the lyrics, same problem as always. No symbolism, no poetry, but also like the melody that the lyrics are trying to fit into, it just makes things super awkward. It sounds awkward. That's the best way I can describe it.
He wrote the music and lyrics separately and tried to smush them together, and it doesn't quite work.
Yep,
that's what it sounds like. Yeah. But again, introduces another story, another character. It's very dark, very sad.
Yes.
But I mean, if you're talking about consistency of theme, he just keeps it up.
What I do like about this song, in a couple different places, they have different sound effects to like, they use different sound effects for dramatic purposes. And I think those dramatic purposes are fulfilled. They're successful in bringing about those dramatic purposes, like with the phaser, when he says way out west, or whatever, and then like the crash or whatever in the third verse. I think those are powerful moments for the song. I think overall it's pretty boring, and then the melody is just kind of clunky. So
yep. Pressure Machine, the title track of the album. I love the pick guitar. I like the guitar work on this song a lot.
Yeah, I think these last two songs are solid. They're solid songs.
Yep.
I will say this song, Pressure Machine, is when I realized how good Brandon's vocals were.
Dude, the falsetto on this song, like the first time I listened to it, I thought it was not him.
Yeah. But as like, when have we ever heard Brandon Flowers use falsetto other than shake a little, like that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
I think he used it a couple times, like in other songs, but like he never like relies so heavily on it.
And this song is catchy. I think it's got a great melody.
Mm-hmm.
I find myself humming it and singing it as I go about my day. It's got some clever lyric.
I love the violin instead of the vocal at the last chorus. When instead of him singing the chorus, it's just the violin playing.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the same tone as Brandon Flowers' voice. Like it's really cool. I like it. So.
Yeah, I love that as well. I think that the Killers, especially with their softer songs, are masters of the gradual build to a crescendo. Mm-hmm. They add layer after layer after layer after layer throughout the song, and you don't even notice that the song started small and is getting bigger until you listen for it. And at the end of the song, you say, oh, this has gotten big when it started so small. And I think this song displays that, and it's musically inspiring to me as I listen to it to say, this is intricate. Like, it's not just a simple acoustic guitar going. It's got a lot of other things going on, but they're so good at it that you hardly notice. And I think that is on display in Pressure Machine.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right. And then the final track is The Getting By. It brings us full circle, I think, for the album. Kind of closes out what they're really trying to say with some of these lines. Some of the lines I noted are, nothing good seems to ever come from all this work, no matter how hard I try. Right? They're trying, they are working, mm-hmm. but it just seems like it's not getting anywhere. Or they've got their treasure laying way up high, where there might be many mansions, but when I look up, all I see is the sky. Right?
Like maybe, and he says, right, like he's still a believer, right? But like there's a practical sense in which belief about the afterlife stops being applicable for now life.
Yeah.
And so it's a fair question, right? Like, okay, I believe I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I believe I'm going to receive these blessings, but like right now I could really use some of those blessings.
Yes. Yep. What do they say? This town is tied at the torso to God's mysterious ways. That's the first time he almost mocks the belief, right? Where he says, God's mysterious way, like every bad thing that happens to you, you just explain it away as God's mysterious way. Well, maybe bad things are happening because bad things are happening and God isn't going to save you from those. Like, your beliefs only go so far in mortal life, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I have something to say about that, but I will save it for my conclusion. As far as like the song itself goes, I think this does probably, I don't know about the best, but definitely most noticeable to me, what you were just saying, the build up, the crescendo, right? Starts off soft and then like builds to like this powerful conclusion. I think that's really prominent in this song, and I think the song's better off for it.
Yep. Great. So those are my thoughts on each track. What are your takeaways from the album? Now that you've listened to it a bunch of times, you've come to appreciate it a little more. What do you have to say?
Yeah, so I really like what they are trying to convey. It's partly like Mormons are normal people with normal problems, right? And people from small town are normal from small towns are normal people with normal problems, right? And so, like, me being both a Mormon and from a small town, like, I get that. Like, I'm a normal person with normal problems, right?
Yeah.
I can relate to that. I really like what they're trying to do. I'm worried I might misinterpret some things, but I think they ultimately fail at delivering that message as well as they were trying to. Simply through, it might be also be because of my own my own self-conscious sort of, I don't know. But I'm afraid that people will listen to this album and be like, oh, see, these Mormons, they're hypocrites because they have all these problems still. Oh, small town folk. Oh yeah, small town living is really bad. You shouldn't desire to live in a small town, right? That lifestyle is just bad. And so again, like you said, I don't think the Killers are trying to be political or anything like here, but my worry is that people will interpret it that way because I don't think they did a good enough job at saying, hey, look, we're just normal people with normal problems.
Yeah. There's not enough of the, hey, this is okay. This is good.
Yeah.
If you weren't listening for those things, you could almost just hear opioid problems, suicide, adultery, suicidal gay people, like all the bad things, and say, well, that's what you get when you grow up in a Mormon culture small town. Yeah. I can buy that. So speaking of which, I know that you're not done with your album. Dustin is working on an album called Hypocrisy and Acrasia. Hopefully that's not too big of a spoiler here. It's going to be awesome. I've had a chance to sneak peek some of the music, and it's fantastic. And I think the lyric will be quite meaningful. But I got hints of that same idea throughout this album, of the idea of hypocrisy versus acrasia, and made me think of you as I was listening, that just because you hold one belief and are mortally unable to live that belief, just because you're looking up to your mansions in heaven, but you're addicted to opioids, doesn't make you a hypocrite necessarily. And I think that's something that you're passionate about. And so I was excited to hear your takes here.
No, I totally agree. Again, I think just the biggest issue, but it's not even an issue, it's a potential issue for me, is that it just wasn't quite clear enough, the difference between those. And that's one of the things I'm worried about while making my album is, am I clear enough the difference between hypocrisy and acrasia? Am I somehow being hypocritical and calling out the hypocrisy of other people? Like those things I'm kind of worried about. But I think definitely those themes, those messages are in here as well.
Yeah, very cool. So my takeaways, I would say that I'm going to make a big assumption that this is what they meant to do. And if they were trying to exercise restraint and self-control to create a soft and beautiful story, I think that they nailed it for me. Once I listened to it a few times, the word that I could use to describe the feelings I got was just inspired. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I just felt feelings. I felt emotional. I felt inspired by it. Coming out just a year after Imploding the Mirage, which was a very happy and optimistic album, it was interesting to feel the difference between the two. I think it takes on sensitive and heavy topics masterfully, that it presents them as they are. This is how it is. And I thought that was beautiful. So it's not an album you're going to put on when you go running. It's not an album you're going to put on a road trip for your friends to listen to with you. It's an album you're going to listen to when you're feeling thoughtful and creative and you're alone in your house and you want to reflect and think. And I think that can be appreciated for what it is, even though there's not necessarily a lot of singles or hits or bangers on the album. So as a Killers fan and as a creative, I absolutely loved it. If you're a casual listener, you probably would hate it. But I personally appreciated what they did and thought that it was very well done and very creative.
Yeah, I agree mostly with all of that. Probably with all of it. So I will say, I do have some criticisms in regard to some of the content, especially that last song, the Getting By. So so the lyric you mentioned, this whole town is tied to the torso of God's mysterious ways. Really? The whole town? There are no redeeming qualities to the town. No one would autonomously, willingly choose to live there because they like that kind of lifestyle. the whole town we have to explain the whole town as being tied to the torso of God's mysterious ways. And I think it's funny because Brandon Flowers is singing about these people who just couldn't escape the small town life when he moved to Vegas and became a famous rock star and now tours the whole world, right?
He did escape it. Does that come off a little condescending? Like, you all couldn't break out of this 2-star town, but I did.
I think to interpret it that way would be to read too much into it. I think Brandon Flowers was being sincere and trying to paint an accurate picture. And I think for the most part, he does a good job, but there are these little things like that lyric that maybe suggests he didn't do as good of a job as he'd say. And then the other lyric you mentioned where, oh no, sorry, I guess you didn't mention it. So one of the lyrics is, I believe in the sun, I ain't no backslider, but my people were told they would prosper in this land. Your people were not told they would prosper in the land. They were told they would prosper in the land if they kept the commandments of God. And so the prospering in the land is predicated upon keeping the commandments of God. And listening to the whole rest of the album, it doesn't sound like they're very good at keeping the commandments of God.
Yeah.
And I don't, like, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, right? I'm not trying to say anything about these people's place in the afterlife. I'm not trying to say anything about their moral worth as people. But not everyone sins by committing adultery. Not everyone sins by participating in the drug epidemic. Not everyone sins by committing arson. Like, again, I fully agree with the sentiment of the West Hills, right? God will reject their actions, but he'll know their hearts. Like, he will, right? He'll be merciful to them. But I am saying that there are natural consequences to certain things that we do, right? If we decide to commit adultery, God is not going to force our spouse to forgive us. When we get addicted to drugs, God's just not going to take away that addiction, right?
Yeah.
We have to face the consequences of our actions. And so sometimes the consequences of those actions get in the way of us prospering.
And this is where I wonder again, and this is too much speculation, but whether or not this is Brandon Flowers' opinion or his interpretation of what people in the town think. Are these people sinning, but they don't understand that that's the issue? That's what's causing their grief. And so they say, well, hey, God, why aren't you blessing me? Well, it's because you've got these other issues in your life. When maybe he's just seeing the way that they feel about it, and that's his expression of what the town feels like they're saying about it. But I will agree with you that, yeah, this album tells a story of the small town, and there are lines in here about the good things, but every track is a story of the bad things, the terrible things about the town. You couldn't have a track in there that's just about the neighbor who goes and helps his widowed neighbor, or like throw in a handful of good stories. If you're telling stories about the town, certainly there are bright, hopeful, happy stories to tell.
And I think, right, the message of the last song, the Getting By, right, that I think he was trying to say that, right? Like, there's still hope. Even if we feel trapped in the small town, there's still hope. But again, I think like some of these lyrics are a little bit just not considering the viewpoint of someone who likes the small town life, right?
Yep. Well, he does say, where is it? It's the final verse of Quiet Town, when he says, whenever I come back to this quiet town, I see my parents in the streets and I reflect on the love that they gave me and my upbringing. Like, there is a little bit of that in there. It just doesn't come through nearly as strong as all the negativity throughout the album.
Sure. Yeah.
Great. Anyways, I think everybody should listen to it. I think it's good.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I like it.
Cool.
What, out of 10, what would you rank it?
Oh, it would depend on the mood I'm in, I suppose. I'd give it a 5 or 6 out of 10.
Okay.
Worth listening to. Didn't change my life. Not going to be one of the albums I pull up and just pick to listen to on my drive to work very often. But I guess that's not the setting that it's meant for. But
Right.
I thought it was just not my style, not what I hoped the Killers would give me. And for that reason, it's got to be 5 or 6 out of 10.
I think I generally agree with that. I would give it like a 7, because I do enjoy it. There are some songs that I would just listen to just driving, right? And I think it is a cool project that they did, and I really appreciate it.
That's what I like the most about it, is I can tell that they said, we're going to try to do this thing, and they did it pretty well.
Yeah. I want to ask you one last question, though.
Yep.
The kingdom of God is a pressure machine. What do you think of that?
Dude, I read the lyrics to that song and couldn't get a ton out of it, honestly. My understanding, my impression is kind of the idea of refiner's fire. Bad things happen to good people because that pressure is what's needed to turn you into something better. And so God allows you to make choices to become addicted to opioids, or to have loved ones commit suicide, or to make bad choices to be an adulterer, because the living and learning experiences through that immortality are going to make you into a better person. That was my impression of it, but I could be way off.
I am really glad I asked you that question, because that is a much more optimistic interpretation than I got when I was listening to it. And that might be the right interpretation. And I'm going to choose to interpret it that way from now on.
Cool.
But I was thinking of it like almost as a criticism, like the church is pressuring you into living a certain way. And like, for myself, I don't want to say that I've never felt like peer pressured into, keeping the commandments or living a certain way. But it's one thing when you disagree with what you're being pressured into, and then agreeing with what you're being pressured into. Like I've never felt like negative feelings towards the pressure I felt, the quote unquote pressure I felt that my religion has placed on me, right? And so again, it's like from the perspective of people willingly a part of the religion, like maybe it is a pressure machine, but there are people willing to go into that pressure machine. And I especially like your interpretation, because pressure is needed to create diamonds, right?
Yep.
Refiner's fire. So.
And it could be a little bit of both, and that's all right.
Yeah. Cool.
Great. Well, I think this has been a good talk. It's a good album.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Can't stop rock and roll.
Can't stop rock and roll. Hopefully we'll do another podcast before the Killers release their next album.
Yeah.
But
we'll do one for your album release coming up.
We could. Yeah. All right.
Great.
Anything else to say?
Nothing else to say.
All right. Well, all you listeners or watchers, keep rocking on, and can't stop rock and roll.